Well, all right. Hey there, how we doing? You drop back in for another little bit of Grimm's A Complete Fairy Tales there? That's right. Well, we will abide after we set the tone. Boom, get the lights out, and we get a little bit of A-Harp on here. Oh, yeah, that's right. A little bit of a low hop there tonight. I tried to get something going on the chromatica, but that's a different beast. So we'll have to do that in the future. Oh, with a different Grimm, my fairy tale there. But tonight, you strap in, all right? Get you something warm to drink there. I don't know, you can pause the video, come back if you like. Or get something cold, maybe a little quicker. I don't know. But let's get on with it. The Skilful Huntsman. There was once a young fellow who had learnt the trade of locksmith, and he told his father he would go now out into the world and seek his fortune. Very well, said the father, I am quite content with that, and gave him some money for his journey. So he travelled about and looked for work. After time, he resolved not to follow the trade of locksmith any more, for he no longer liked it. But he took a fancy for hunting. Then there met him in the rambles a huntsman dressed in green, who asked whence he came and whither he was going. The youth said he was a locksmith apprentice, but that the trade no longer pleased him, and he had a liking for huntsmanship. Would he teach it to him? Oh, yes, said the huntsman, if thou wilt go with me. The young fellow went with him, bound himself to him for some years, and learnt the art of hunting. After this he wished to try his luck elsewhere, and the huntsman gave him nothing in the way of payment but an air gun, which had, however, this property that it hit its mark without fail whenever he shot with it. Then he set out and found himself a very large forest, which he could not get to the end of in one day. When evening came, he seated himself in a high tree in order to escape from the wild beasts. Toward midnight, it seemed to him as if a tiny little light glimmered in the distance. He looked down through the branches towards it and kept well in his mind where it was. But in the first place, he took off his hat, threw it down in the direction of the light so he might go to the hat as a mark when he had descended. Then he got down and went to his hat, put it on again, and went straight forwards. The farther he went, the larger the light grew, and when he got close to it, he saw that it was an enormous fire, and that 3 giants were sitting by it, who had an axe on the spit and were roasting it. Presently one of them said, I must just taste if the meat will soon be fit to eat, and pulled off a piece and was about to put it in his mouth when the huntsman shot it out of his hand. Well, really, said the giant, if the wind has not blown the bit out of my hand, and helped himself to another. But when he was just about to bite into it, the huntsman shot it away from him. On this, the giant gave the one who was sitting next to him a box on the ear, and cried angrily, Why art thou snatching my piece away from me? I have not snatched it away, said the other. A sharpshooter must have shot it away from thee. The giant took another piece, but could not, however, keep it in his hand, for the huntsman shot it out. Then the giant said, That must be a good shot to shoot the bit out of everyone's merry mouth, such as one would be useful to us. And he cried aloud, Come here, thou sharpshooter, sit thyself at the fire beside us, and eat thy fill. We will not hurt thee, but if thou wilt not come, and we have to bring thee by force, thou art a lost man. At this invitation, the youth went up to them and told them he was a skilled huntsman, and that whatever he aimed at with this gun, he was certain to hit. And then they said if he would go with them, he should be well treated, and that they told him that outside the forest there was a great lake, behind which stood a tower, and in that tower was an imprisoned a lovely princess, whom they wished very much to carry off. Yes, said he, I will soon get her for you. Then they added, but there's still something else. There's a tiny little dog which begins to bark directly anyone goes near. And as soon as it barks, every one of the royal palace wakes up, and for this reason we cannot go there. Canst thou undertake to shoot it dead? Yes, said he, that would be a little bit of fun for me. After this, he got in the boat and rowed over to the lake, and as soon as he landed, that dog came out running, and was about to bark, but the huntsman took his air gun and shot it dead. When the giants saw that, they rejoiced, and thought they had already had the king's daughter safe. But the huntsman wished first to see how matters stood, and told them that they must stay outside until he called to them. Then he went into the castle, and all was perfectly quiet within, and everyone was asleep. When he opened the door of the first room, a sword was hanging on the wall, which was made of pure silver, and there was a golden star on it, and the name of the king. And on a table near it lay a sealed letter, which when he broke open, and inside it was written that whosoever had the sword could kill everything which opposed him. So he took the sword from the wall, hung it at his side, and went onwards. And then he entered the room where the king's daughter was lying sleeping. And she was so beautiful that he stood still, and holding his breath looked at her. He thought to himself, how can I give an innocent maiden into the power of wild giants, who have evil in their minds? He looked about further, and under the bed stood a pair of slippers. On the right one was her father's name with a star, and on the left her own name with a star. She wore also a great neck handkerchief of silk embroidered with gold, and on the right side was her father's name, and on the left her own, all in gold letters. Then the huntsman took a pair of scissors and cut the right corner off, put it in his knapsack, and then he also took the right slipper with the king's name and thrust that in. The maiden still lay sleeping, and she was quite sewn into her nightdress, and he cut a morsel from this also, and thrust it in with the rest, but he did all without touching her. Then he went forth and left her lying asleep undisturbed. And when he came to the gate again, the giants were still standing outside waiting for him, and expecting that he was bringing the princess. But he cried to them that they were to come in, for the maiden was already in their power, that they could not open the gate to them, but there was a hole through which they must creep. Then the first approached, and the huntsman wound the giant's hair around his hand, pulled his head in, and cut it off in one stroke with his sword, and then drew the rest of them in. He called to the second, and cut his head off likewise, and then he killed the third also. And he was well pleased that he had freed the beautiful maiden from her enemies. And he cut out their tongues and put them in his knapsack. And then he thought, I'll go home to my father, let him see what I have done, and afterwards I will travel about the world. The luck which God is pleased to grant me will easily find me. When the king of the castle awoke, he saw the three giants lying there dead. So he went to the sleeping room of his daughter, awoke her, and asked who could have killed the giants. And then said she, Dear father, I know not, I have been asleep. But when she arose and would have put on her slippers, the right one was gone. And when she looked at her neckerchief, it was cut, and the right corner missing. And when she looked at her nightdress, a piece cut out of it. The king summoned the whole court together, soldiers and everyone else who was there, and asked who set his daughter at liberty and killed the giants. Now it happened that he had a captain who was one-eyed and a hideous man, and he said that he had done it. Then the old king said that as he had accomplished this, he should marry his daughter. But the maiden said, "Rather than marry him, dear father, I will go away into this world as far as my legs can carry me." The will go away into the world, and the king said that if she would not marry him, she should take off her royal garments and wear her peasant's clothing and go forth, and that she should go to a potter and begin to trade in earthen vessels. So she put off her royal apparel and went to the potter and borrowed crockery enough for a stall. And she promised him also that if she had sold everything, if she had sold it by evening, she would pay for it. Then the king said she was to seat herself in a corner with it and sell it. And he arranged with some peasants to drive over it with her carts so that everything would be broken into 1,000 pieces. When therefore the king's daughter had placed her stall in the street, by came the carts and broke all she had into tiny fragments. She began to weep and said, "Alas, how shall I ever pay for the pots now?" The king had, however, wished by this to force her to marry the captain. But instead of that, she again went to the potter and asked him if he would lend her once more. He said no, she must pay for the things that she had already had. Then she went to her father and cried and lamented and said she would go forth into the world. Then said he, "I will have a little hut built for thee in the forest outside, and in it thou shalt stay all thy life long and cook for every one. But thou shalt take no money for it." When the hut was ready, a sign was hung on the door, whereupon it was written, "Today given, tomorrow sold." There she remained a long time. And it was rumored about the world that a maiden who was there who cooked without asking for payment, and that this was set forth on a sign outside her door. The huntsman heard it likewise, thought to himself, "That would suit thee. Thou art poor and hast no money." So he took his air gun and his knapsack, wherein all the things which he had formerly carried away with him from the castle as tokens of his truthfulness were still lying, and went into the forest and found the hut with the sign, "Today given, tomorrow sold." He had put on the sword with which he cut off the heads of the giants, and thus entered the hut, and ordered something to eat to be given to him. He was charmed with the beautiful maiden, who was indeed lovely as any picture. She asked him whence he came and whither he was going, and he said, "I am roaming about the world." Then she asked him where he got the sword, for that truly her father's name was on it. He asked her if she were the king's daughter. "Yes," she answered, "with this sword," said he, "did I cut off the heads of 3 giants." And he took out their tongues from his knapsack in proof. Then he also showed her the slipper and the corner of the neckerchief and the bits of the nightdress. Hereupon she was overjoyed and said that he was the one who had delivered her. They went together to the old king, fetched him to the hut, and she led him into her room and told him that the huntsman was the man who had really set her free from the giants. And when the aged king saw the proofs of this, he could no longer doubt, and said that he was very glad he knew how everything had happened, and that the huntsman should have her to wife, and on which the maiden was glad at heart. Then she dressed the huntsman as if he were a foreign lord, and the king ordered a feast to be prepared. When they went to the table, the captain sat on the left side of the king's daughter, but the huntsman was on the right, and the captain thought he was a foreign lord who had come to visit. When they had eaten and drunk, the old king said to the captain that he would set before him something which he must guess. Supposing anyone said that he had killed the 3 giants, and he were asked where the giants' tongues were, and he was forced to go and look, and there were none in the heads, how could that happen? The captain said, "Then they cannot have had any." "Not so," said the king. "Every animal has a tongue, And then he likewise asked what anyone would deserve who made such an answer. The captain replied, he ought to be torn to pieces. Then the king said he had pronounced his own sentence, and the captain was put in prison and torn into 4 pieces. But the king's daughter was married to the huntsman, and after this he brought his mother and father, and they lived with their son in happiness. And after the death of the old king, he received his kingdom. Ooh, I think we've heard a story like that before, just with different characters and different plot points. But hey, I guess the old brothers Grimm were more about quantity than quantity. Quantity over quality. Who's to say? I don't know. But hey, Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. That was this time. Botched a couple of them sentences in there, as you could hear, but they was a little wordy and they was a little different. So mind you, I was bound to mess them up a little bit there. Any event, hey, you want your own copy of Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales? Well, head on down to the description now. We got a little bit of an affiliate link. You can buy you a copy and just see how many redundant tales you can find within its hardbound cover there. All right, until the next time, you have a good one.